Welcome to A Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes, and today I'm delighted to be joined by my right-hand man, Kevin Graham. Welcome back, Kev. How are you doing?
Not too bad, Paul John. How are you? How are you today?
I feel better than I did on Friday. I was choked with a common cold on Friday. It was a common cold, just a wee sniffle.
Well, we are socially distanced across this table and in the studio, and I have got my face mask with me just in case you do start sneezing.
No, that was one of the reasons why I did it myself on Friday, Kevin. I didn't want anybody in the room, just in case. So anyway, recovered from that.
Must admit, you done well on Friday flying solo. It was a cracking watch.
It was a 20-minute podcast that turned into an hour. So there we go. There's plenty to discuss. First and foremost, I wake up this morning, Kevin, to the usual WhatsApp telling me what the Celtic team is today. Is the team getting leaked again? I know it was a big problem last season.
I messaged you on Thursday or Friday, was it? And for me, Neil Lennon comes out and says there's disharmony in the camp, and all of a sudden we start getting the team lines again. So the two go hand in hand. So we need to try and guess who's the unhappy camper in the dressing room that's leaking the teams, and what purpose does it actually serve, leaking the team? What's the point of leaking the team?
I don't like it. I mean, I remember going back, often what can happen is that there's an issue with one or two people, and I think we spoke to John Barnes about that, Kevin, and how there was a couple of players, and he named them actually on the podcast, who were feeding stories to the press, and it was I think it's one of these things that the harmony in the dressing room can be affected by that, if you're looking around wondering who it is that's speaking to this journalist or that journalist. But last season, virtually every single week I was getting the team line sent to my WhatsApp, and 99% of the time it was right. I'd rather not see it. I'd rather not get that, because if I'm getting it, somebody's at the capers at the club, and that's not good, because obviously we mentioned last week about the comments made by Neil Lennon after the game suggested that there was people who were unhappy. So that's what we want to avoid.
I know, but for me, leaking the team, I'm a bit like you. I got the exact same WhatsApp messages as you. But overall, bigger picture, why does leaking the team to somebody, like, what good does it, if you're unhappy in the changing room, what purpose does leaking the team to somebody actually do for you?
It lends no purpose whatsoever.
It lends no purpose whatsoever to your cause, for you to get back into the team, get out of the team, go to wherever that you want to go. I just didn't understand it. It seems extremely petty. Well, absolutely petty.
It is. We're getting messages coming in relation to that. Mick, welcome to the show. You're watching on YouTube. Anyone who is watching on YouTube, make sure you subscribe. Everything that A Celtic State of Mind does is free. So please, if you do have the team, that's all fair and well. I'm not going to read out the one that was sent to me because I can't substantiate whether or not it's true. But what I'm going to ask you, Kevin, is how would you line up today?
I would probably not go the same as the other night, right enough. I would maybe go the same formation, the 4-2-3-1, but we need a centre forward in there. So that centre forward's either got to be Ayeti or Kamala.
Okay. Are you making changes? I know that you're going to stick to the same formation. Who's coming out of that team from Wednesday night?
Out of that team from Wednesday night, I'm probably going to drop Cham and move Ryan Christie back into his sort of more natural position. With Brown and McGregor as the other two, Forrest and Mo as the two. At the back, I would keep El Hamed in, even though he did make the mistake. My other back two would be Julian and Ayer, because they are the best two centre halves at the club, and Greg Taylor. Yes, Greg Taylor is the only left back that we have got, but I think Greg Taylor gets a raw deal, and so I would play Greg Taylor anyway. I like him, and obviously the goalkeeper picks himself. So
you've not told us who's it going to be up front, Klamala or Ayeti?
I'm going to go, and yes, I have seen what's been kicking about, but I reckon it will be Kamala to start off with.
Simply due to the fitness aspect?
Simply due to the fitness aspect.
Right. I mean, again, it's one of these things that we were speaking about the comments that Neil Lennon made, and some people were very critical to suggest for a moment, Kevin, that there was a lack of harmony in the Celtic dressing room. Well, that's exactly what Neil Lennon said when he suggested that players wanted to leave, and it had been bugging him for over the last 6 months. So it was actually Neil Lennon's words that we were focusing on, which is something you've got to do as Celtic supporters. You've got to actually look at what the situation is and whether or not there's going to be a lot more departures. I know that Tommy Roderick's on his way out. The reports yesterday is that there's been a deal agreed with the buying club, Kevin, and Tommy Roderick will be on his way for £4 million. 27 years of age. I think it was 32 games over the last 2 seasons he's appeared in. Do you think it's the right move?
Yes. Big Tam goes with all my best wishes in the world. He's always going to be welcome back at Celtic Park, but sometimes the buses just pass, and his bus is now leaving the bus stop. I love the big fella, always will do, but he's now at 27, 28. I think he wants to move back closer to Australia as well. If he is going to Qatar, we're not 100% sure of the club that Celtic have accepted the bid for. But the rumours were it was Qatar. That'll give him less travelling time, less stress on his body when he's playing for Australia and international games as well. But it's a shame to see him go, but it is quite clear that he's not in Neil Lennon's plans.
You know, I think it was about a year ago, pre-season last season, you and I were discussing the fact that Ncham had suggested he wanted to leave back then. And I'd said to you that I would have kept Ncham, and there was a possibility of selling Roderick for £10 million at that point. £4 million. You think back to the impact that he has had during the last 9 years, and in particular the consecutive trebles that we've been winning. And when you look at the Invincible treble, Kevin, and I'm not getting all too nostalgic about this, I know that the people in the squad need to make an impact in the here and now. But £4 million, nothing really. When you think that, we spent maybe £3 million on the likes of Klamala, for example, or Bolingoli. So £4 million, are we being shortchanged there, or are we now in a situation where he's not played enough games to demand a higher fee?
I'm going to agree with you. He hasn't played enough games for us to demand the £10 million that was quoted maybe 2 years ago, when he had scored that fabulous winning goal in the cup final, when he was at the peak of his powers. But we're looking at 2 seasons since where he's only played 32 games. That's going to affect the transfer fee. And for me, £4 million is a decent deal for a player who is now basically 4th or 5th choice in the squad for his position.
Yeah, he's nowhere, is he?
So you have to look at the bigger scale, the bigger picture. Yes, you'll see players in England going for players with less talent, going for far more money than Tom Roddick, but he's injury prone. He's 27, 28. It's a diminishing market for Tom because of his injuries, really. So I think £4 million is a good deal.
Okay, and it looks as though that's been completed. During last week's fallout, I would call it, or after we were knocked out of the Champions League, Kevin, we went out and signed David Turnbull, a player who, is one of the most exciting Scottish talents in the game. And it was met with somewhat of a muted response, simply because everybody was still focusing on our departure from Europe. Now that the dust is settled and we're looking at the fact that's a fantastic signing, actually, £3 million for Turnbull. How is he going to get utilised? Do you look at him straight away pushing for that first team jersey? Is he going to be one of these players very much like Klamala, who has been kicking his heels on the bench or not even on the bench for the last 7 months?
It's interesting because I watched the interview with him, and obviously I was here last Monday as well doing the bulletin, and what I says about David Turnbull was, in the games I've watched Motherwell this season, which has only been highlights I must say, he was in the middle of everything that was good about Motherwell this season. He's got energy and he tries to make things happen. The player himself says he can either play as a box-to-box midfielder or number 10. So it'll be interesting to see where Neil Lennon sees him. And I do see him actually trying to come in and make an impact right away, because there's no adaptation time to Scottish football. He's played every game this season.
True.
He's fit, which seems to be a problem at Celtic. Players don't seem to be fit quick enough. He is fit. He's shown great determination to get back into the game after a serious injury. He's shown great determination to get back to Celtic Football Club as well. When you look at his interviews over the last couple of days, he always knew he was going to end up back at Celtic.
He waited for us and we waited for him.
Yes,
Yeah.
and we've also got to say that Neil Lennon's waited on him as well.
Yeah.
Neil
yeah.
Lennon's never tried to sign another midfielder.
No, he was on. It was on Neil Lennon's radar, wasn't he?
Turnbull has always been Neil Lennon's top target. So if you add all of those together, you get the mass of yes, he is going to make an impact this season.
See, this is the thing as well. You look at who we've brought in, who we've actually signed this pre-season. I keep calling it pre-season. We're in the midst of it now. And you look at Barkas, Ayeti, El Yunusi, Turnbull, and normally you're excited by that. You think, wow, that's a brilliant bit of business. We're actually shelling out the kinds of money that you would expect. Yeah, it's all been a bit kind of damp because of the Champions League exit, Kevin, you know. And people who I know really, really well during the week have been in touch with me thinking that I went in too hard on Neil Lennon after that game. I'm going to stick by what I said. I blame Lennon on the night for the actual team selection, Kevin. At no point have I ever said Lennon out. I've never ever subscribed to that. What I've said is that he was to blame on the night. But I think that he has overcome adversity as the Celtic manager second time round on a number of occasions, and he'll do it again. I actually do believe that. I think we'll go out today and there will be a comprehensive victory against Motherwell. Any predictions before we go to some of the messages and the questions coming through from the viewers?
I just really want to step back about probably the last time I really want to talk about the Champions League exit, because we have got a Europa League place to actually fight for, and like it or lump it, my opinion is we're a Europa League team. So I enjoy the Europa League, so I'm looking forward to playing in the Europa League. We'll try to qualify for the Europa League anyway. But what you mentioned about Neil Lennon there, Neil Lennon made it an issue. He spoke about the disharmony in the camp. He turned this into one of those daytime Spanish soap operas that you see when you're on holiday, when the dead brother walks in married to his cousin after being out for 2 seasons.
Was that one of the El Dorado storylines?
Probably El Dorado, or you know the type of soap opera. He's turned it into a soap opera, so it's up to Neil to actually sort it out. What I would actually say though was his comments after the game. You will all remember the Athens game when Brendan Rodgers had very calculated before the game, when he mentioned the unrest and he wasn't happy. Lenny done it when he was at a high emotional state. It was an outburst where he couldn't hold it in any longer. And I would rather see my manager react emotionally than being calculated, which Rodgers was calculated at that time.
Good point.
Today, I think we may struggle today. Motherwell also, they played during, they had a decent victory over Glentoran on Thursday night in the Europa League qualifiers. But I'm going to go back to when we went out to Cluj last year, and the following game we played Dunfermline at Celtic Park. And we ended up going to extra time because there was still that hangover.
There was a hangover.
There was a hangover over the team, and we all remember that awful footage of when Celtic were going into extra time, and it looked like the players were ignoring Neil Lennon.
Yeah,
I'm sure the viewers will remember that, and I'm looking for any sort of victory. I'm looking for any sort of clues that Neil's maybe got the dressing room back inside, because it's up to Neil. Whatever doubts that we've got about Neil Lennon, yes, Neil was to blame for us going out to Cluj and also to Ferencváros the other night. But the fact that we've only qualified 2 years out of 9 for the Champions League is solely down to the broken model that the PLC board try to put us through.
Yeah.
What they try to implement, the only bit of the model that works is selling players. That's the only bit of the model that works. So I'm hoping just to get a wee victory today, and for Neil for us to get steady again, us to get settled. If the players want to leave, let's get it done quick. Let's get the players that we want in quick, rather than just all this uncertainty, which could actually last to October, which is galling and crippling for me anyway.
So any victory, you're going to give us a scoreline? Give us a prediction, Kevin. Stop sitting on the fence.
Stop sitting on the fence. I'm going to go 1-0 and Greg Taylor's going to score it.
Wow, 3-0 for me. I don't mind who scores, but at some point Christie will score a goal, I think. Let's go to some of the viewers. Mick, you are commenting via YouTube, when's the next album up for review? That might be a reference to the regular, which has become an irregular show that Kevin and I do called Scream of Celica, where we focus on an album. We talk through that album and we look at what Celtic were up to when that album was released. We've no plans at the moment because we've been so busy with the bulletins and the match day content, but we will be coming back onto that. There's a few other podcasts we're working on as well under the State of Mind banner, so keep your eyes peeled for them.
We're maybe looking to do it a bit differently as well, so get more interaction like Mick commenting and that. So
yeah, let us know what album you would like to see reviewed, Mick, and we'll see if it's one that Kevin and I are aware of.
Or
hopefully.
We could listen to it.
Exactly. You could introduce us to it. Also on YouTube, Simon Leach. Welcome to the show, Simon. Brilliant player, but I'm a little concerned at how much our team's play seems to rely on French Eddie for when he does eventually leave. It's always a concern, isn't it?
It is a concern. It was the same when Larsson left, and
Larsson did seem like they're replaceable, didn't he?
And we had a year where we didn't really have anybody. We had Bellamy for the last 6 months and that, but Eddie will leave. I remember being hurt when Dembele left. I remember being hurt when Brian McClare left. We always replace them. We always find replacements. We always find new heroes. So yes, the way that we play just now is centred on the way Eddie plays, but the team will change. But I don't expect them to go this season. I expect him to be here at least this season anyway.
He's shown a great kind of attitude, isn't he? I mean, from the Eddie camp, if you like, we've found out that he remained in Glasgow during the pandemic, and I know a lot of people were surprised at that. And then obviously the suggestion is that he does want to stay. There's no immediacy for him to leave the building. So that, I find in the modern game, that's positive for me, because generally speaking, you look at footballers, or certain footballers, Kevin, as being kind of mercenaries, so it's great that it looks as though Edouard will stay. I think that gives us a massive boost. We need to get back to the day-to-day football today, as I would call it, the bread and butter, as Bill Shankly once called it, and go out and get a victory against Motherwell. Keep the comments coming in via Twitter, Facebook and YouTube. Glasgow Rebel, good afternoon. I hope everything is doing well at your end as well. Please get involved, keep the comments coming in, and follow our Celtic. Bit odd team leaks and in-house stuff getting out. I do find it odd. It's frustrating as hell. It must be very frustrating for the management team as well.
Definitely, and if it is one of the players, as I said about 5-10 minutes ago, I do not see the point. But if it's a member of the staff, then does that make it worse if it's a member of the staff? Is this member of the staff trying to be a big in the know, trying to... I'm going to go off on a tangent here. Is it a betting thing?
Is it a betting thing? I don't know, Kevin. It's one of these things. There's going to be a lot of people aware of that team group. You know what I mean? When you look at the amount of people who need to know at Celtic, and all it takes is
stuff like that.
Somebody texting their brother or their dad, who then shares it with another. That's how difficult it is. It's so difficult to keep that in house. But again, we've spoken about how easy it would be to figure out where the leak's coming from, because you could put a fake team, couldn't you?
We've got to remember it did stop when Lennon came back that February. It was every week towards the end of Brendan Rodgers. Then when Lennon came in, it stopped completely.
Yeah.
So whoever it was must have been happy that Lennon came in at that point, and has now decided that he's not very happy that Lennon's...
Listen, we don't know if it is a team.
No, we don't know.
It's just another message coming out through the old WhatsApp. And Gary Doonan, welcome back, Gary, via Facebook, and you're saying a perfect cure is 3 points today. Absolutely. And you know what? We need to really get the points on the board, because we're 2 games behind, and we'll speak about Bolly at some point today. We're 2 games behind, so we can't fall any further behind than our rivals, who seem to be at this moment in time Rangers and Hibs.
Definitely, and I don't really look at the league table at this point anyway, because we're too early in the season, and the league doesn't usually flatten itself out until you've went through 2 rounds of games. For me anyway, like when you've played each other home and away, because form's temporary. Clubs can go up and down, and it changes, But the fact is, this is not a normal season already. We're 2 games behind. The pressure is on already, because we were there that night with Gordon Stratton, and Gordon Stratton's the title at Tannadice. He says that he reckons that the pressure got to the Rangers team because we had the points on the board and they had the games in hand, and the games started coming thick and fast for them, and they just didn't have the legs to do it. And it's always better to have the points on the board.
Yeah.
But the Celtic mantra is they always look at a game at a time. And what we've got to look at it just now is if we win every game that we've got until we get to the same level of games as our 2 rivals, and I know Hibs are playing today, then we're joint points with them. So we're not behind them at this precise moment in time, but we really need to actually, 3 points is a must today, just after the week that we've had. We need to get 3 points. It wouldn't matter if we're top of the league. It wouldn't matter if we're on the same points as Hibs and Rangers. We just need 3 points today. We need to get back on the bike.
I'm greedy though. I want a good performance and a few goals as well. There was a wee guest appearance behind you there just when you were talking, because obviously we've got the match day coverage coming up at 2:30, and our guests have started to arrive. Jack Gallagher, you are commenting via YouTube. All right, boys, brilliant to finally catch you at the beginning of the live. Well, Jack, what we will be trying to do as this moves on is to get a really fixed schedule. You know, it would be good to be putting the bulletins out at 12:30 of a day, so that everybody can get used to what the schedule is. At the moment, if you're on YouTube and you subscribe, you should be getting notifications if you click on the notification bell. So thanks for your support. Declan McConville. The nonsense reported in the week about players hiring coaches has now been proven wrong. If Eddie wants to stay, more rubbish from other Celtic media outlets. Well, there's a lot of rubbish comes out from various outlets, Kevin, be that alternative media outlets, mainstream media outlets. Everybody's chasing the same chip poke, aren't they, around a windy field when it comes to that. But there's nothing wrong with looking at situations and giving opinions and then trying to get fans' views on it, and that's what we're doing with the bulletins. We want it to be live and interactive, don't we? And when you've got that and you're getting the views and you're getting opinions and they can be balanced, then it's worthwhile. We often hear things coming through from our listeners, and it makes you kind of view things a wee bit differently, Kevin, you know. So I get exactly what Declan's saying there. There is a lot of nonsense flying about
the nonsense
online.
The nonsense about the coaches is one of the biggest nonsense I've ever read. The Celtic internet has got a tendency to eat itself whole after bad results, but to come out and claim that we forced players to have injections, which has been disproved as well, and that we hired their own coach, they were that disappointed with the training that they had their own coaches. That is fantasy land. That should have been written by J.K. Rowling. That is... Who sits and thinks up this stuff?
People, Kevin, I'll tell you who. People who set up websites for the benefit of click ads. It's ad revenue. And then they need to get an amount of clicks every single day to meet their threshold because they're doing it full time. So what they'll do is they'll throw in a story often about Rangers, because you and I both know in this game that actually generates clicks, quite sadly. If you sell a story about Rangers on your website, something a Celtic state of mind don't do is the clickbait advertising revenue. But that is exactly where this problem lies, Kevin. So they'll actually sell stories online, clickbait headlines, just to get the traffic in, so that every single day they get their daily quota of ad revenue, so that at the end of the week in the month they've made up their wage. So there's an agenda there. That's the problem.
I've got no problem with people doing that. People have got to make a living, and I've got no problem with people doing that. What I do have a problem with is the absolutely scaremongering that goes on after every defeat. And right, we have spoke about it, but that's because our manager came out and says it. and we had to deal with it. But I'm going to lighten the mood here. See, when I read the bit about the players having their own development coaches and paying for their own development coaches, my first thought was, I wonder if Ryan Christie has his own development coach, and why can he not still take corners?
True.
I'll be asking for a refund.
Yeah, the corners are been a wee bugbear recently, Kevin, and I find it bizarre that, you know, somebody like El Yunusi can't take a corner. It seems that Ryan Christie's had 2 games where he's taken 17 corners, and correct me if I'm wrong, I can't remember any of them coming to anything positive, to the point where I was suggesting just take it short and start to build a move around that, or get somebody else on the corners, because it's not happening for Christie.
Did he take the corner against Reykjavik that Julian scored from?
I'm not talking about that game. Yeah. Didn't he throw in a spanner in the works? I'm talking about Dundee United and Ferencvaros. But aye, potentially, yeah. Aye, he potentially did. But moving on to the next point, Kevin. Joe Porter, welcome back, YouTube. If he wants to go, let him go. He shall regret it when he goes to Villa and gets relegated. I did say during the week, you know, I don't think a move from Celtic to Aston Villa would be a good one for Edouard. No, I really don't. Because you could go down there, I'm not saying disappear, but you could end up with 9 or 10 goals in a season. And then, you know, do you really have the next step of development, which, you know, we're now looking at Dembele, probably a stage ahead of Edouard in terms of his development, Kevin, and he's now looking for the next big move. I wouldn't have thought that the level of Aston Villa is what Edouard's looking at.
No, I don't think it is. And these guys seem to be, Dembele and Edouard seem to be well represented and well advised. And what you sometimes find is the young French lads will end up going back to France for a couple of years, develop, get into the international setup there. Because Dembele was advised by the French national team manager to go back to France. Right. Don't go to England, come back to France. So if you have a look at it, for Edouard to get Champions League football, he would have to go to 5 teams in England. You look at those 5 teams in England, and even though I think that Edouard could play for any one of those 5 teams in England, they're not going to sign him. He's going to need to actually have another stepping stone. Yeah. But I reckon that stepping stone will be back in France, where he can go to a Lyon, a Marseille, a club like that, who will get Champions League football, and he'll progress again under the tutelage of French coaches. Then he'll get to the point where Dembele is now. His next move is probably going to be England. So I reckon there's another stepping stone for Edouard, and the Midlands, Crystal Palace, or any of the clubs that has been mentioned are not the stepping stone.
No, and again, it's an interesting point, because I did say during the week there that any English club looking to Dembele in the first instance would be doing well to marry that up with coming in for Edouard. Not that I want that to happen. I don't want Edouard to leave. But, you know, any club would marry the two of them up. I think that would be a devastating partnership. You mentioned just a few minutes ago Henrik Larsson, and I want to point out the fact that he's now the assistant manager at Barcelona, Kevin, and Koeman is going to get him to coach the strikers. Now, I do believe I suggested that at the beginning of the season when we lost Damien Duff, didn't we? And my point was that we don't produce enough goal scorers through our academy. Goal scoring strikers, I meant. I know that Forrest chips in with goals, etc. But we don't produce enough prolific goal scoring strikers. And it's been an issue for decades. We mentioned Charlie Nicholas in the 80s, Jerry Craney in the 90s, and since then there's been a real dearth of them. I think there's been a suggestion that Sean Maloney might have been the only other one. I know that as his career progressed, he didn't play as an out-and-out striker. But yeah, Henrik Larsson, good enough as a coach to coach his strikers at Barcelona. Would he have done a job for Celtic in that capacity?
Of course he would have. But then the problem we got, and this was one of the other rumours that came about after the defeat during the week, that Lennon didn't want him taking his thunder. I think that was the exact quote that I read. Not from Lennon, but from whoever came up with that rumour. Henrik Larsson at Celtic would be great for any young laddie coming through, because we still talk about him in those reverential tones, and we always will. He's probably going to be the greatest Celtic player I'm ever going to watch in my lifetime. But it's quite strange when you look at his managerial career. You look at he had a cameo in Barcelona's history, really. He's not he's not a Messi in Barcelona's history. He's a footnote, even though he did help them win a European Cup in Paris against Arsenal. But he's still well loved. I remember Colin saying, if you go to Barcelona, you go to the shops that sell the Barcelona merchandise, that there's pictures of him. So he is well revered there. But the problem with Barcelona is you're in Barcelona, it's going to be post Messi, and that's like the world ending. That's like that's a seismic change at a football club. The best football player in the world's going to leave, and he's leaving in quite a bad way. So it might be a tough gig for Henrik. It might be a tough gig.
So welcome him back if it is a tough
I'll
gig.
welcome him back anytime. Again, that was a bit long-winded.
No,
there, but
it's a fair point. It's a fair point. One final point, actually, because this is a half-hour bulletin before we go into the match day coverage, which starts at 2:30 with special guests Stevie Mullen, Jim Simonetti and Jerry Farrell. All three of them will be giving us input into the upcoming match against Motherwell. There's a good point here, and we have mentioned Lee Griffiths time and time again on this podcast, Kevin, over the last few weeks. OB Boy via YouTube is asking, where is Lee when we need him? And they do need him now. I mean, is it now getting to the point where people are just accepting that Lee Griffiths won't be back in? I mean, I would love to see him back in. I think it would be good for him, and at this moment in time, it would be good for us.
Definitely. I say definitely quite a lot now. I do agree with you, because we need Lee Griffiths, but we've got to the point where we don't even consider him for selection now. In the back of my mind is now set up that Lee Griffiths has got this constant calf strain, that he's never available for selection.
Yeah.
I want to see him back in the team, but the chances are that his time's been and gone at Celtic.
Sadly.
Sadly. And why is he not there? Why does he keep on getting the calf strains? No, remember, was last season, the season before, he was getting calf strains and they changed his boot. Because they put like I can't remember what it is, but one boot was higher than the other,
right,
because of the way that he was running. So has he still got that problem, or is it just a cover for something else? But I find it really sad that I no longer consider Lee Griffiths when I'm thinking about who's going to play for Celtic.
Indeed. Now, we both reckon that Celtic will overcome Motherwell this afternoon. We'll be back with our matchday coverage at 2:30, and we'll have a bulletin at half-time and then the post-match coverage as well. Thank you all for joining us on a Celtic State of Mind today, and all that's left for me to say is, Kevin, thanks for joining me on the Axon Bulletin.